Spike, I'm sure everyone knows that you have fans from all walks of life, and of course, there's one very famous, very well-respected fan in particular who wanted to be here, couldn't be here, but wanted to send a message.
These are a series of cliches you've
That's my job this evening. Here we go. I have a letter to read out to you from His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales.
Do I kneel down for this?
I'm in enough trouble already. I'm not going to say a word.
And the Prince of Wales.
Prince of Wales. I'm sorry I have to do this, but I know it takes a lot of impact out of it, but here we go. As someone who grew up to the sounds of the Goon Show on the steam-driven wireless, I must confess that I've been a lifelong fan of the participants in the show, and particularly of Spike Milligan.
Oh, the little grovelling bastard.
Where I was now, wasn't well, okay. Anyway. And particularly of Spike Milligan, whose wonderfully original humour has always reduced me to helpless hysterics. It is
cripples. I know people who have been crippled.
That's enough of that. Okay, so welcome to this incredibly. We decided to do this about 12 minutes ago, Andy. I think.
It's not long.
Yeah.
Very impromptu.
It is impromptu indeed. So, Vegan Graham, hello there. Paul Hatterley, hello. Sophia. Michael Askew, never misses anything. Got to love Spike, indeed. The Real Thing. I used to have a couple of your records, I think. And Vegan Post Mortem so far, which is not bad.
It's good to know that your notifications must work pretty well, because that wasn't a lot of notice for people.
No, it was about 7 minutes. Oh, yeah. So that's pretty good. So this comes about because I posted some quote from 1988, I think, with Donald Watson, the best known of the vegan social movement pioneers. And I got a comment from Kay Bealey, I believe, and saying, do you know that the Vegan Society have kind of promoted the coronation of this character and suggested a vegan quiche. And well, the last I heard that, this guy is supposed to have a vegan chef, and that they're supposed to be vegan this and vegan that and vegan the other going on in terms of this this particular kingdom. Is that what you heard, Andy?
Yeah, I did read about. I'm not sure whether it's a full-time gig. I could be mistaken. I think that it was kind of exaggerated a little bit. I think when I read the story, it was basically they'd got a plant-based chef that was going to be working at one of the places that he spends some time at. Like it's not like there is full-time travel around with him, personal chef. I think it was just that one of the places he spends some time, one of those chefs is going to be plant-based.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the way that the things are going, potentially you going into a local Wetherspoons could give you a chance that there's a chef that's plant-based, and you can get a news story about it. I mean, the one thing that the Vegan Society could have done is they could have taught you how to make a vegan quiche to throw at it, because at least then it would be plant-based, and you should at least show your discontent with the situation. But I mean, come on, as a social justice movement, these aren't the kind of people that we should be looking up to.
A vegan quiche with some fox poo in the middle.
But yeah, I mean, you think of all the things that not just him, but like the whole monarchy have always stood for. It's kind of the opposite of what we are trying to achieve. Really.
Well, I mean, I messaged Ronnie when we decided to go on, and I said, "Has this guy ever renounced all the years and years and years of hunting that he did?" But he hasn't got back to me yet. His pacemaker must be charging, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, this guy. In fact, on the thumbnail that I did just now, don't even know if I can bring that up because nobody would have seen it. I don't.
Just because I haven't seen it, no.
No, hang on a minute. Where would it be even? Okay, now I've got to do some shenanigans. Okay, well, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll get rid of this. So you can talk about this for a minute while I try and work out what the hell I'm doing. Because this is what you sent me, right?
That I was going to say that's from that spiel that I copied off the Vegan Society website. Yeah, I mean, he's been a long advocate for environmental issues, and it would have been great to see more environmental conscious selections in coronation recipes. It'd be great if he didn't oppress pretty much everyone around him too. It'd be great if they hadn't built their entire monarchy off the back of others. But yeah, there's some issues with it. You're right, there really is, but they're really big issues, like fundamental issues that we probably should be taking into consideration first, i.e., not giving this a whole lot of attention from the Vegan Society, kind of maybe setting a precedent that no, we don't support the oppression of others, we don't support the exploitation of others, and that's kind of what you stand for. I mean, this whole thing's being taken off taxpayers' expense, where the vast majority of them don't want to contribute towards it, with no say in the matter. Even this is off the back of others. Like, I just think it sends the wrong message completely. Yeah, that's Prince Charles. This is the person.
There's no mention of the other animals in this statement at all, is there?
No,
no. I mean,
nothing at all. No.
I mean, what's going on, Vegan Society? What the hell are you doing? I mean, where is the radicalism of this movement gone? That's what I want to know. I mean, Ronnie and I been talking about this for a while. You know, like this used to be a radical kind of cutting edge movement. You know, and people,
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, but even if you know, if we took the diluted, watered down version that people want it to be, i.e., recipes against cruelty. Cruelty right in front of you. Why aren't you against that at the very least? Because you know this is going on.
250 million is that the cost of the coronation? Then is it?
Yeah, $250 million from what I've heard.
Yeah, well, that's it then, isn't it? Yeah, blimey.
Yeah.
Why is the Vegan Society doing this? Well, that's why we came on, because I didn't even know about it until about 20 minutes ago, and I was just thinking, wow, you know, I mean, come on. I mean, this is ridiculous. I do remember that. Well, going back to Milligan, I mean, Milligan had a kind of love-hate relationship with Prince Charles, because he did. You know, Milligan used to do a lot of work for compassionate farming, along with. All right, that's supposed to say "up your jumper." I think it is. Stick it up your jumper. So I've obviously made a mistake there. Yeah.
I wonder what that was.
Your jumper. Yeah. So Milligan used to work with Joanna Lumley for Compassionate World Farming quite a lot, but he also had a relationship with Prince Charles, and he was very kind of he was very critical of Prince Charles going hunting, you know, and he was also a regular guest on Parkinson. Do you know? You must know Parkinson.
Yeah.
Okay, and so obviously that was a big kind of deal. Chat show at the time. I think it was on the BBC, and then it might have changed. I don't know. And Milligan used to be every single season you'd have to have Milligan on there. And a couple of times he would walk on with his Friends of the Earth kind of T-shirt, and you know, and Parkinson would go, "Oh, tell us about the goons and all this kind of stuff and all that." And you know, there's one or two times when Milligan was obviously going through his depression time. You know, he's bipolar and all that, which used to be called manic depression in those days, right? And eventually he would go, like, well, fuck the goons. Let's talk about the environment. Let's talk about what Prince Charles is doing to the other animals, you know, this kind of stuff and all that. And he was so he had this kind of weird love-hate relationship with Prince Charles, because they exchanged letters. And you know, even on the 50th year of the Goon Show, they had a special on the BBC, and again. Charles wrote him a letter. Oh, sorry about that. And yeah, so out of sync with this.
The height of professionalism.
Didn't even turn anything off or anything. Yeah, that's right. I'm surprised they even put the screen down and put the lights on. Yeah, so it's a wonder you're not just seeing me in the dark. Yeah, so. I mean, another thing I remember about Charles is that he kind of coerced Diana into going hunting and stuff. And she said later that she didn't want to and all this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying anything great about Diana, about in terms of vegetarianism, or even Spike Milligan and Joanna Lumley, because they were like vegetarians. They never made it to veganism, which was a shame. But obviously, that's why they work for Compassion World Farming more than anybody else. So they were a kind of big deal in terms of their anti-battery cage kind of campaign. I mean, that campaign was going when I first became vegan in 1979. It was raging in there, and nobody knew, of course, that if you banned battery cages, that the industry would respond with enriched battery cages. But I mean, that's just the way that these things kind of work, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
but you'd think as time went on, we would take that kind of information on board. Well, yeah, this is how they used to deceive people and just continue kind of exploiting in a nicer situation all these years ago, and yet we're still campaigning for that for the most part.
What's this one? Graham, didn't Charles also turn down a request to stop using bearskin hats?
I don't know if that was Charles. I know the request was turned down because they were. Yeah, I know Peter brought them. They paid for them, didn't they? And actually, gave them, and they said no for whatever reasons. But I don't know who that was responsible. Yeah,
I think that is. That is kind of. Probably it was Queen who did that, wasn't it?
I know it was a little while ago. I think she was still with us then. So, I don't know whose decision it was, but I do remember it happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Charles is an animal murderer. Yes, I expect nothing less from him. But I mean, it's not him that we're complaining about in a way.
It's exactly that. Yeah, we don't expect any less from him. To be perfectly honest, it's them trying to jump on this bandwagon and forgetting about everything else.
Yeah, for people who didn't see it, this is the beginning of a statement by the Vegan Society, and I could read out the last of it, which I didn't have. Where does it finish? Coronation recipes. Our Plate Up for the Planet campaign highlights the environmental importance of what we put on our plate, and with animal farming accounting for nearly 80% of greenhouse gas emissions. For the agricultural sector, we need to make informed choices. Choosing to make this vegan version of the Coronation quiche is a simple and delicious, environmentally friendly swap. So,
it'd be interesting as well, just focusing on the environment that Charles obviously cares so much about. I don't know if he's postponed the world tour that follows this coronation, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're not flying. Maybe he's going to go on rowboat. Because obviously, the damage to the environment, flying to all over the world and visiting all these places, that's obviously really important. But the environment doesn't even matter, does it? Clearly. I mean, look at the lifestyle that these people live. No, it's just embarrassing, really. They'd have been better off just not touching the subject at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't expect them to be like abolitionists about this, right? It's the Vegan Society at the end of the day, but just don't say anything. Instead, just leave it. It's one of those subjects that there's no win, really, if we're being honest. And it's very disrespectful to the philosophy and to kind of like what this movement was set out to be against, when that family are responsible for a hell of a lot of it for a long, long time.
But I mean, also, don't you think that part of their statement could have at least been, we want to reiterate that veganism is not a diet?
Well, that would have been nice, but
it would rather, wouldn't it? Kind of, just something to say. Well, obviously we're latching on to this because of the attention it's getting and all the rest of it. Kind of, we're just trying to get some, traction because of the coronation and everything. Obviously, they're not going to be critical of it. I mean, the movement is too corporatized. We've lost our vegan, our radical edge. Michael's saying, as the Vegan Society lost the plot. Did it have the plot after 1960?
To be fair, it's been a long time since I could really say I did anything that I was proud to be part of or have anything to do with.
Well, it's interesting though, because in terms of social movement theory, right, is that in terms of this idea of when you get kind of movement kind of foundation and growth, and then you get movement takeoff and everything. the movement takeoff is when it becomes very popular, and that's a really danger time for movements, because then you get a lot of people flooding in who have not got the same values of the people who started it. So that creates all kinds of problems. But the classic case given in the literature used to be Greenpeace International, who moderated, right? The classic case in social movement theory about the animal rights movement with bunny rabbit ears was PETA, you know. But I mean, it's the same with the Vegan Society. You know, as soon as we get up to 1979, when they started working on the current definition as we know it now, which eventually was finished by 1988, they'd also got things like articles of memoranda. They'd kind of become professionalized, which, you know, has got pros and cons to it, in the sense that, you know, the Vegan Society used to be kind of in people's houses at one point, you know, and that was the kind of the headquarters, as it were, because there's that in joke started off obviously with Donald Watson and his house in Leicestershire, I think, and then Kathleen Janaway ended up with the Vegan Society in her house, and of course, you know the joke. Do you know the joke about where it was?
No. But it's just made me think, though. I'll let you finish, but it's just made me think that it's brought up what we were talking about not long before this, i.e., that interview that he did with George Roger and what he's talking about.
Yeah, well, Watson. What
a perfect example of what we're talking about. The Vegan Society.
Yeah. Well, do you want to explain the context of that?
Yeah. In fact, I can read it out. I've got it in front of me. But essentially, we were talking about how, from Watson's asked the question, essentially, it's that, do you have a message for the many thousands of people who are now vegan? And it's kind of like, look, this is a lot bigger than what you're giving time day for. Basically, it's a lot more than just exchanging recipes. It's a lot more than just about food. This is a big thing, and I don't think that we've grasped that at all. And when you look at like the Vegan Society from today or from a couple of days ago, what perfect example of what he's talking about. And we're years after this. And if anything, we're regressing. We're not going forward. That people who are supposed to be the ones inspiring this and kind of keeping the whole philosophy alive are actually responsible for watering it down as badly as anyone else.
Yeah, well, the end of the joke is Leatherhead anyway, but...
right, I'm with you. Makes sense.
Yeah. So the Vegan Society was located in Leatherhead. See, the thing is, and this is a point that I've kind of raised with Ronnie, are we here out of touch? I mean, like, for example, have they not just gone with the flow and think, right, society in general is not very radical anymore. The animal rights movement, which is another bunny rabbit ears, is not very radical anymore. So they're kind of going with the flow, and the people who want to either rekindle radicalism or to kind of maintain it, whatever language you want to use, we're the ones out of touch, because everything is like a corporation now. It's all about branding. It's about selling your bleeding hats and your hoodies and all this kind of crap, right? We were talking about that earlier on, you know, about everybody is branded now, and everybody's got to wear the uniform and all this kind of stuff. I mean, the idea even, I mean, you were talking about the SABs, right? That, you know, in the early days of sabbing, and I remember that, you know, there was no uniform to be worn. You know, I mean, the idea in those days was to kind of blend in.
Yeah, whereas now, you know, matching T-shirts and hoodies and caps and that kind of thing, that's as high up on a priority list as a set of walkie-talkies. Like,
so it's another kind of weird kind of thing that's going on.
I mean, you're not wrong in the sense that it does feel and appear that we are the ones out of touch. But like, if that's the case, I mean, I suppose I can't think of an example where you could, if it started off as being quite radicalized and then you watered it down, it would be okay. But we're opposing, what we're up against is far more radical than we've ever been at any point, in terms of extremity, in terms of violence, in terms of mass. We can't get softer and softer and softer and less and less and less, you know, sort of organized or willing to do things against this, the more that we should see the opposition trying to unradicalize us. It's the more that we should be radicalizing, not going with the flow.
Yeah,
surely.
and also the size of the animal genocide is rising, and we're softening our approach.
Yeah, it makes no sense. We're dealing with extreme. We kind of have to at least meet that halfway. You can't. It's just not going to work otherwise in any way, shape, or form. But I mean, if I read out Donald Watson's answer, I suppose we can look at it and say, are we out of touch, or are the vegan society not fulfilling his obligations that were left to them? I mean, because he responds with, yes, I would like them to take the broad view of what veganism stands for. Something beyond finding a new alternative to, shall we say, scrambled eggs on toast or a new recipe for a Christmas cake. I would like them to realise that they're onto something really big, something that hadn't been tried until 60 years ago, and something which is meeting every reasonable criticism that anyone can level against it. Now, that tells me that, I mean, you'd be looking at this going, this is not about diet. This is not about recipes. This is not about jumping on bandwagons. This is a massive, big thing. And we're not embracing that.
You know what we should do? We ought to adapt that and put, instead of putting for a Christmas cake, we should put quiche and go, how far
That's
ahead?
a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. We could swap it. We could swap it for a coronation quiche. Yeah, absolutely. Christmas cake, coronation quiche. What's changed? Nothing.
Well, but the thing is, I mean, like that response was he's been asked to give advice to the new vegans, wasn't he? Kind of, you know, what advice was it? Going back to what Cliff said, which is interesting, because one of the things that Watson said when he wasn't that old, but he kind of became the president, and then he got the what was it called, the president's post, or it was called something else, you know, a little bit Star Trek, you know, the kind of, the president's log it was.
The president's log, right, yeah.
And so he used to write this president's log, and he was thanking the Vegan Society for staying faithful to the values of the founders. And he did that, I'd say, about at least 3 times in my knowledge. But as kind of Cliff is suggesting now, and what Michael was saying also, that has gone now. It's kind of like you've got this problem that, just as we were talking about in one of our Still Alives, was that you can't make it up as you come along. But not only are the new members making it up, but the new careerists who are getting the jobs are making it up. They don't have to reference to the past. It's like a parallel to what's going on with the Culture and Animals Foundation, with the invisibilization of Tom Reagan. It's absolutely appalling. It's kind of corruption in our movement here, folks. That's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And you would think that once you start seeing that happening and people coming in and redefining and changing things, especially such core principles and values that we're talking about that they're trying to change, that would be when you're like, no, we can no longer be softer. We're going to have to re-radicalize again. Like, this can't happen. If anything, it's like, just let them do it. Just let them get on with it. It's easier than saying anything.
We seem now as a movement frightened of our own fundamental values. So when we talk about being animal lovers, when we talk about cruelty, have mercy, and all that kind of stuff, Reagan always reminded us that that's not the fundamental wrong, right? But we'll never point out, we'll never state that, you know. And they don't in their thing about go back to, you know, well, don't forget our focus is on what we do to other animals. You know, I mean, they won't do that. There's all kinds of examples of this now, where we don't talk about what our fundamental position is, and it's as though that's almost like being diluted, and we've just got the periphery left. It's very disappointing.
Well, even moving away from using the word vegan at all, you know, the amount of times now that it's just referred to as plant-based or a vegan diet and not veganism, that word's become a massive scare word for many. Even the Vegan Society don't like using it.
We are just a talking shop. Yeah, well, that's this program, probably. Protest has been stamped on, and a majority will not stand up against that. Extinction Rebellion and Animal Rising are doing something, even if not wholly what we want. Well, I mean, I'd agree with that. And I did an interview earlier today for a radio thing that's coming out, and we were pointing out that there's kind of direct action, and then there's the claims making that goes with it. And so I think we've still got a lot of work to do with the claims making, because that has kind of fallen into this kind of trap of moderation too. We're kind of a little bit reluctant to say to people what our fundamental position is, because even the phrase "go vegan" now doesn't have what Reagan would call the moral freight that it used to have. Because I don't think that if people hear the word "go vegan" now, they think, oh, that means the abolition of animal use, the abolition of exploitation. I mean, that's not what people think, is it, Andy? Now they think, oh, I need to change my diet, or I need to make adjustments to this, and maybe I need to give my leather coat to the charity shop or something.
Yeah. It doesn't extend much further than food for most people, and even then they don't fully understand even the diet part of it a lot of times, and will conflate or add. I mean, literally, there was a guy in a vegan group earlier trying to tell everybody how honey was vegan because it comes from a different part of the bee than what we've been told, as if that made any difference to any of the claims. But this is what we're dealing with.
We've been looking at a fairly new YouTube channel. And there's this guy on there who's kind of basically saying that every vegan should have their own definition of what veganism is. So that's kind of weird.
And there's quite a lot of those that are kind of adopting that approach, to be honest, aren't they? I mean, it's not just him. There's quite a lot of people that seem to be redefining it to suit, or at least changing something about it to suit them.
Yeah.
But again, it all comes back to this. Well, who's challenging them? Who's saying anything?
I think Cliff's point here is really interesting and also correct, because what is possible and practicable? I don't think, in fact, I contacted Barry Q, but he never got back to me, actually, because I used to be in contact with him a lot when I was writing my PhD, and he was a big part of the vegan committee and the vegan society. I think he had other roles in it. Might have even been the chair at one point during the time when this definition came out with the practicable and possible part of it. And I was trying to get from him, does he remember what they meant by that? Because I'll tell you what I don't think they meant is the way that people like Alex O'Connor use it.
Well, it is a get out clause, isn't it, for a lot of people?
Yeah.
And I think a really easy way of looking at it is literally anyone that's listening, think seriously at any point in your life, forget how long you've been vegan, at any point in your life, have you ever used the word practicable in a sentence other than reading out that definition? Because I've got a pretty big vocabulary, and I know I haven't and wouldn't. Most people don't understand what it means.
Kind of trip off the tongue, does it, Andy?
Most people don't know what it means, and they straight away misplace it for practical. And
they do, yeah.
Yeah. So like most people don't know the word, and if they do know the word, they misconfuse what it actually means. So
even content creators have had the thing on the screen, and they've still said.
Yeah, we've talked about that quite a few times, where they've read it and they've still read it as practical. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
So here we are, Mr. Andy Atkinson. Here's a challenge. The next poem you write, I challenge
have to use the word practicable. I could use it. In fact, I could make a thing about that and saying, like, I'm struggling to fit this into a sentence. We should probably take notice of that. I mean, that definition took 10 years to coin.
Yes. Well,
but that's you had plenty of time to get it right, and that's the best you came up with. Not very impressive. But you'd also think if they looked at it then and thought, let's change it, this is causing some problems. Do you not see that now and think, maybe we should revise that particular section or something because of this loophole that it's providing people? But I don't think they care enough.
I think it's to do. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's obviously to do with the professionalization of what went on and all that, which is always what it's always about.
Yeah.
And just see, whenever you get a group of people who their first instinct is to think, how will this affect my job? right, rather than the cause, right, then you've always got a problem.
Yeah, of course.
You know?
Think of how many times that I'm sure vegans have used the sentence that it's very difficult to make someone understand something if their wages depend on them not understanding it towards, say, a farmer or whatever. Well, it works both ways, I'm afraid. It's exactly the same for the people on our side too.
Yeah, I had to look up practicable. I think that's what Cindy's saying.
Yeah, I have asked that question quite a few times, and everyone normally says, yeah, when I read the definition out or talk to anyone about the definition, I've never used it in a sentence otherwise, and it makes sense.
Actually, in the differentiation between practicable and practical is I mean, it's definitely there, but it's kind of a little bit tricky too, isn't it, to remember? So
yeah.
So what's the message? Vegan society, pull up your socks if you've got any left.
Yeah, or I mean, or maybe hand over the reins to someone that cares if you don't. But yeah, it's kind of about, if this philosophy means anything to you at all, stop ruining it. Stop letting everyone else ruin it. Stop letting everyone redefine it. Actually put your stamp down and say, no, this is what it is. This is what we stand for. This is what we stand against. Have something. Have some integrity somewhere.
Well, the last time I looked at the Vegan Society, I think it had about 66 members of staff, I think. But then there was this kind of a bit of a shake-up about a month ago, I think, and there's been some redundancies, I believe. But even now, I think most of the people are pretty young, right? And so, of course, you've got to ask the question, like with the rank and file, is that how much of the history of the movement do they know?
Yeah, that is a good point.
And then you got the other problem is how much do they care about? Because we do have this terrible thing of making it up as we go along type issue, which I've never. I mean, I've spoken to some people who do that, but I've never been particularly impressed about what they say about it.
Yeah.
Because I once thought that when you start to tell them about the foundation of a radical movement, they'd be fascinated by it, and I was a bit shocked to the core when I found out that they weren't.
Yeah.
They actually resisted knowing about. And now, to be honest, I mean, I don't know if anybody in the comments can tell me this, but how can anybody come into a movement and not only not care about the history of the movement they've just joined, but also be resistant to knowing what it was all about? I mean, like that blows my mind. That I don't understand that at all. I really don't.
Yeah, and I suppose you could go one further and make it even worse by saying, not only do they have no interest in the epistemology of the movement or any of this stuff, they don't take the time to learn any of it. However, they want to redefine it. They want to change it. They've got no interest in what it used to mean. So at least they could say, "Wow, I've got some problems with this. This is some changes I'd like to make." No, it's just I've got some changes I'd like to make. But I suppose, I mean, I can understand if it is a much younger crowd now that are working for the Vegan Society and stuff, and I get that, and people don't like looking back and they don't like reading and stuff. But I mean, the Vegan Society, like, if there was anywhere that has a collection of all the writings and everything that you could ever need to learn your history in one place, it's on your website. Like, it's not difficult. I'm sorry, if you're going to apply for a job there, make it one of the criteria. It's real simple stuff. Do you care about the movement? Yes. Can you answer these questions? If they can't, they don't care about the movement. Real simple for your CV, just to try and keep a bit of, something going forward. Because I don't see it. I don't see that evidence. I see that you don't care about it, and you don't care what others think about it either. And I mean, to reply to the comment that you got left, yeah, Donald Watson probably would be turning in his grave. And how could you blame him?
Yeah, it's weird.
It's not being respected as a solution for these things. It's not being respected as something big. It's not being respected in the way that it was designed to be. It's being disrespected. It's literally being, if they're not the ones that are diluting it, they're allowing anyone else to do so without challenge, and that's disrespect as far as I'm concerned. And the only people that are really going to put a stop to it is them.
That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, like this here is I often quote this. Maybe I should put it on a bigger screen as that. This is 2014, and it's Matthew Cole. He's a sociologist, and he's kind of trying to do a bit of a summary of the movement. And he's looked at the movement, and if you look at the title of his chapter, "The Greatest Cause on Earth," which is a Watson quote, right? The historical formation of veganism as an ethical practice. Okay, so that's where he was coming from. So he was looking at it, and he was saying that the aim of veganism was always about non-exploitation of other animals, but also a kind of liberated human being, a vegan self, as he puts it, and that would lead to a more compassionate human society. And vegan ethics from the beginning was directed towards these interconnected goals of transforming human beings and transforming human society. And that is a direct reflection of the writing of Leslie Cross in particular, and to some extent Eva Batt, to some extent Kathleen Janaway, and to some extent the kind of later writings maybe of Donald Watson. Yeah. And basically saying that so the idea would be to transform our society by transforming human beings, and we would do that by transforming our relationships with other animals. Yeah. So that was their kind of theoretical kind of position, that we've got into such a goddamn state that we need to kind of sort ourselves out. We're hit some kind of trough, and we need to get back out of it. And we do that through veganism. And the first part of it, the first focus of it is to look at the violence that we perpetuate against other animals, but to see that in the context of the violence of the world. I mean, as you've said, and you said in your brilliant film, Andy, I mean, all of them would have gone through the Second World War, and some of them would have gone through both global conflicts. And I always try to emphasize how devastating it was for them. I mean, Watson used words like shattering and stuff, and it's because for our generation, you know, I mean, I don't remember anything about the war. I was born after it. I mean, the effects of the war were still around in Britain at the time, but I don't remember anything about it. Whereas someone like Watson, they lived through it, the bombing and all that kind of stuff. It was and
the aftermath as well. I mean, it didn't really hit home until I was watching that film that, like, if we want to Google, say, the Holocaust now, we can type in one of the camps, right? And we can pull up video. All of this information was coming out for years afterwards. It's not like the war ended the next day. They were like, big expose, look at these pictures. It went on for yonks and yonks and yonks, still finding out the atrocities that people could do to one another and stuff. It went on and on and on. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that Watson really sums that up in the end of that interview that he does. Read the thing out from him and George Roger, whereas he kind of says, so we've never had a civilization before. Like, veganism hasn't been around for long enough for us to see, like, generations and generations of this, to see how it actually shapes the world in so many different ways. We've never had that before. We've only ever had disorder and destruction. We've never had a proper, true civilization where people work together and care about each other. We've never had that. And it's right, we haven't. How can we dismiss something we've never given a chance to? But if we keep reducing it down, we'll never have it, ever.
And didn't he also say that we can never call ourselves truly civilized until we get veganism as the core of our values?
Absolutely, yeah. And he's right. Because I mean, literally, going back to the royal family and stuff, everything that we've ever done in the history has always been off the back of someone else, hasn't it, or another species. We've always built or saved some oppression off the back of another piece of oppression. That's how it's always worked. We've never had a civilization that just says, no, we're not doing this anymore. We've always compromised.
Will no one from the Vegan Society come and talk to us about what's happening? I don't suppose anybody would be given permission to do it. I wouldn't think. And they'll have their rationale about what they do. It kind of goes back to the fact that back in the day, the Vegan Society wasn't seen as part of the animal movement. It was kind of seen as like the food group, which was weird. And then they put a lot of emphasis on things like the the trademark and this kind of stuff, right? In the same way as the BYV or whatever it's called now, cruelty free international, whatever it's called.
I mean, how would something like that actually work now? Let's just say hypothetically you could get in touch with someone and said, look, we propose that you make these particular changes. How would they make that decision now? Is it kind of like a democracy, or would they put it to vote, or?
Yeah, it'd have to go through the AGM, and if things got a bit heated, you'd have maybe a series of EGMs.
Because I mean, just think back to when they changed the definition before. Were you as just a vegan, were you allowed any input? Was the kind of like, what do you think about this, or did they just check?
Well, this I mean,
because bear in mind, we are supposed to be a social movement, social being the key operative word there,
Yeah, well, here's the shameful thing on my part is that I and no people that I knew took any notice of the Vegan Society.
Right. Okay.
It was just irrelevant to us. It was kind of just didn't figure. And like there was this weird thing because it was all single issues at the time. And the idea of veganism as the moral baseline, that was miles away. Well, at least another 15 years away, kind of thing, from say 1980. And so we saw Compassionate World Farming as part of the animal movement, and we saw the League Against Cruel Sports as part of the animal movement, and we saw young groups like Animal Aid and all that, right? And it kind of didn't really matter whether whatever they, I mean, they were all kind of Animal Aid was completely Peter Singer right down the line, In fact, Animal Aid produced a volume of animal liberation and called it the Bible of the new animal rights movement, and that's what Gene Pink called it. There's a big thing on the back of it. I mean, first of all, Bible is bad enough, and then the complete mischaracterization, and then of course that was taken up by Peter, who've lied about animal liberation forever. But we just didn't see the Vegan Society as relevant. The only interaction that I had and my partner at the time with the Vegan Society was when we were trying to get their membership cards off them for the prisoners, right?
Right.
And they said no to that, and so we forged them.
That's interesting though, because that makes me think that potentially a lot more people now know of or have some association with the Vegan Society, because it's the easiest place to find the definition on the internet. As though, like, if that part of their website didn't exist, that most people probably still wouldn't care about them.
But we didn't need the definition because we never talked about veganism.
Yeah. But I mean, that's to be fair, that's probably their most linked page, isn't it? I'd love to see the website traffic for that website and say, show me the page with the definition on versus all your other pages, and show me what the percentage is in terms of traffic. But at the same time, we've taken that into consideration. Even more so, why that should potentially be the most important thing that you get right, and there isn't any like caveats or loopholes or escape routes from it. Like, it should be really strong. That should be your strongest message. If that's the only thing that most people are going to see if they do visit your site, that's got to be the best thing, and I don't think it is. And I mean, was it you saying for a long time? It wasn't even like, it was way down the page. It's only more recently that it's been put into that grey box and you can actually find it. Whereas once upon a time, it was just like part of the text.
You must have read my mind, because I was just about to bring it up.
I was going to say, I remember you telling me before, because I mean, I can only remember seeing it in that greyed out box. But yeah, that's even more ridiculous.
Yeah. So if we bring that up on the screen. This is down to Jeremy Hess, really.
Right, okay.
Who was one of the co-founders of the Animal Rights Show.
Yeah.
Has now gone back to the States. We deported him, I always say. So this is it. But this definition, this full definition, which has got the kind of searchlight idea that we talked about in the panel on Wednesday, I think. It wasn't here. So it just said at the beginning, as a kind of subheading, it said something like a way of life, a way of living that seeks. It started off with that, right? So it missed the first four words. Veganism is a philosophy, which is a crime in itself. and then I think it stopped at other purposes. You see the other purposes there?
Yeah, other purpose. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it stopped there. And so I was talking to Jeremy, and we were talking about the definition, and he kind of read that out, and I said, well, that's not a definition. He said, well, yeah, it is. And so he got this page up. He did what I've just done. He got the page up on the screen when we were talking, and I said, well, scroll down. And he'd never done that.
Most people haven't. I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, in fact, and before you mentioned it, I hadn't, because this, you know, you expect the core, the most important part, like they'd make this as accessible as possible. Like I'm saying, a lot of people will only ever visit this page.
Scroll down. It was around about here, right? So you had to scroll. So it was kind of like we were getting loads and loads of kind of like little weird variations of this. All of them excluded the philosophy bit, the crime, as I'm calling it. And then a lot of them started to exclude all forms of exploitation. And so we ended up being, veganism is a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and other purposes.
Which is, for the most part, what people think it is. No, more or less.
Well, this is a little bit better than that dictionary one that you had to do.
Yeah. Just abstaining from eating animal products. Yeah, a little bit better. But I mean, you can understand, can't you? Like why people are a bit confused about it and stuff, because a lot of people only do read this page and nothing else, and even then, it is vague. Could be much stronger than that.
Yeah, we don't need it. Well, yeah, I mean, like we didn't see. The thing is, it's changed in my eyes because we didn't need it in the 80s because we didn't talk about veganism. I mean, I do remember an interview with this guy called John Page, who I'm still friends with. He's gone to live in Scotland with his long-term partner, and John was a real kind of radical activist in Liverpool when I was there. So there was me and John, this guy called Dave Callender, and his then wife Fiona Hughes, and there was all kind of things going on. And then John got the job of being the local group coordinator, I think it was called, for the BYV, and he started to do quite a few TV things, right? But again, he went on there as representing the BYV, so that's anti-vivisection. But I do remember one time when, kind of out of the blue, I don't think they asked him what he ate, but I think they asked him, well, do you wear leather shoes? Right. Which vegans used to get asked a lot in those days, right? Do you wear leather shoes? And I remember the camera kind of like zoomed in on his shoes, and he had these kind of these canvas pumps or runners, they say in Ireland, you know, which were kind of green flash things, Dunlop green flash, which was the thing at the time. And they were all battered and bruised and ripped, and it looks so funny. They kind of, you know, he was kind of like moving his feet, going, "Don't film my feet," you know, kind of thing. But what I'm trying to say is that we weren't asked about veganism, and the worst thing is we never brought it up either.
Yeah,
you know, so we didn't even need to know the definition. It wasn't an issue, and in those days we would probably talk about veganism and vegetarianism as kind of virtually the same and this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we were very ill-informed on the grounds that the Vegan Society wasn't relevant to us. You know, it was really kind of weird. I mean, looking back, it seems so weird, and I know I have a lot of trouble explaining this to relatively new vegans because they're going, "How could that even be?" Right? But that's where it was. Right. Well, we said 15 minutes.
Yeah, nearly done an hour.
Have we really? Yeah.
50 minutes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I get really annoyed when people use this definition, continue to use cruelty and welfare claims. Yeah. Well, it's a shame that the word cruelty is in there at all, really.
Yeah, it is, and you'll see people quite often, even again going back to it'll be right in front of them, and they'll read it out, and they'll put cruelty before exploitation too.
Yeah, I know that kind of really gets me, because at least if you look at the official definition, it's got exploitation of and cruelty to. And I think that, again, going back to what Cliff said earlier on, is I think that's also part of this possible and practicable bit, that they're trying to kind of be, I think they're trying to be reasonable, right? And I think it was part of the conversation of is it possible in a non-vegan world to be vegan, right? So that was a big concern, and it kind of still is. It still comes back, and I mean, like, how possible is it for us to live in we're in a non-vegan world? So can any of us say that we're 100% vegan, as it were? Not that phrase has got anything meaning to it in a way, but is there such a thing, as a complete vegan? And you kind of think, well, we're blocked by society, even if we just think in terms of crop deaths or something. At the moment, we can do very little about that, unless you kind of dropped out of society and just lived from your veganic allotment only, kind of thing. And who's going to do that? Who can anyway? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So as young vegans, you weren't versed and respectful of the original. No, that's right, because we didn't take any notice of the Vegan Society. It was a little bit kind of hippie trippy throughout the 60s and probably the 70s, and then towards the late 70s and into the 80s, that's when it kind of professionalized, and that's when the movement changed. That's when Francis Young started arguing about veganism should be the moral baseline. And so once that starts to become part of our gig, then the definition of veganism is suddenly relevant, where it wasn't really until then. When we were asking people to kind of ban blood sports and ban the battery cage and all this kind of stuff. Ban fur coats, or not buy fur coats. And there's big campaigns to ban fur farming. All of those single issue things, and then you got obviously hunting stuff and all that. Veganism, didn't really come into it, which is why we can all take heart, actually, for if you want to try and end on a positive note, is the fact that vegan education as we know it now is this century only, really. Started in mid 1990s, but it was kind of stop-start. None of the main groups got on board, and I've got a time tunnel about that. I mean, the main groups now are kind of Viva the vegan charity and everything. They were terrified of the word vegan until about 6 years ago. They were petrified of the word vegan. They had all these experts, these vegan strategists, telling them that veganism was a scare word. You shouldn't use it. This idea that we're in a pre-vegan stage, and that maybe we can talk about veganism in 20, 30 years' time, but it's too risky now. These strategists had this idea about don't talk about veganism too much, don't talk about animal rights because that's too complicated, and don't use words like speciesism because that's too academic. If you're talking to a bunch of students, you can use words like speciesism, but if you're talking to the public, then you're just talking over their heads because they just haven't kind of got the intellect. It's ableist, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Everyone is somewhat. Oh, sorry, Paul. I was going to bring yours up, and everyone is somewhat constrained by the rest of society. Well, yeah, but we're also there to challenge it. As Watson said, we need to ripen people up. So, can we join the society as members and vote in Roger and Ronnie as the new leaders? Yeah. Prime movers, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll want the gig, but it's an option.
Yeah. It is an option, isn't it? Right, are we done then,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. Unless
Yeah.
anyone wants to chime in with anything sort of Prince Charles related before the end.
This is an interesting comment. I don't really know the context. Veganism is not about dropping out of society. Don't know the context of that. Did you see the context of that?
No, I only see the ones that you've been pulling up. I mean, but I can understand that in the sense of the, not only like obviously to take the social aspect into consideration, but the problem isn't us. We shouldn't have to go and live in the middle of the woods or whatever to be able to do these things. It's the rest of the world that are causing these problems. So, like, yeah, I mean, we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to hide away because the rest of the world continue to exploit. The rest of the world need to stop exploiting. I mean, it comes back to this radicalness again. Like, yeah, we need to draw a line and stop being pushed back from it, because eventually we won't have any core principles anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether Bianca wants to expand on this, but this is intriguing for me on the grounds that, well, yeah, it's not about dropping out; it's about actually transforming society, as Matthew Cole pointed out before from that article. I mean, veganism was about revolutionizing society. In fact, it was more than that. It was about revolutionizing the entire world.
Yeah,
it's about bringing the world to a new realization, a new moral footing, which is where they get the kind of moral evolution of humanity. I mean, it's a massive idea, you know, and some people might say, big idea, yeah, as Watson said. So yeah, I think the flip side of this, and you know, I don't want to put words in Bianca's mouth here, but the flip side of this is this idea of normalizing veganism. Well, that's all right to a degree, but we can't lose the radicalism, otherwise nothing will change. You know, so you know, it's not about dropping out, but it's about trying to transform and trying to bring in, you know, new sets of values. Yeah, okay, exactly. If any, then we're here to change this. We are. That's exactly what you know, the people who started the vegan social movement wanted.
Yeah,
you know, and they had good reason, which comes up in your film in a very probably the most dramatic way that I've ever seen in a vegan related film. When you switch to the footage of the war, I mean, it's kind of like wow. Because
yeah, I wanted everyone to sort of like, because I mean, these are I've used that example. I talked about Donald Watson essentially being a conscientious objector before, but it had never really resonated with me just how much that actually meant in terms of like all of this is going on, and you're like, no, we want to seek this instead. It would have been so easy to just like, it's so horrible, I just want to hide, but they didn't. They were like, no, we're not having this anymore. Want to do something about it. Want to make sure that nobody else has to suffer in this way ever again. Nobody else has to be made to. You know, it's such a big thing. Seriously, like we're talking about the solution to all of that shit, and that's what's being reduced. That's why it's so disrespectful.
This is interesting, isn't it? Can't wait to stop saying vegan food.
I like that idea too. Yeah,
I mean,
it's just food. Yeah.
How many times does that come up on TikTok? Well, what about all the insects that are killed for your vegan food, right? It's, you know, what about the avocados who are killed? Well, that are killed, they would say, for your vegan food. And the first question is, what's vegan food? What are you talking about?
I can never get anyone that actually answers that question. That's normally the end of it.
Somebody tried to tell me today, oh, we're talking about soya. And then they tried to do that thing where the so-called livestock only eat the husks and the byproduct from soya, and human beings eat the actual bean, which isn't true because there's just far too much of it to be consumed by humans.
Yeah.
Although ironically, a lot of non-vegans eat a lot of soya because it's mixed in, isn't it, with
all sorts of stuff. Yeah, all over the place. It's like a bulking agent, isn't it? And all sorts of stuff. It's corn, so it's corn. You know.
Right, well, people, I'm very impressed that you've stayed with us. We're on an hour, so that's a good time to finish. And we've got 17, 18, 19, 21.
Oh, yeah, almost an hour exactly, in fact.
Yes, indeed. I've got somebody calling me here, so I'm going to try and stop that. Right. Okay, people.
It's the Vegan Society. Your membership's been revoked.
Yes, your membership has been revoked. I've never been a member.
Mine was never granted. Yeah.
Yeah, but I've got a few forged membership cards if you want them back. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Right, people. I don't have any play out or anything. I feel a bit weird not having a play out. So we just got to inanely wave.
I just do the bye.
Yeah.
Oh, play days.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye, boys and girls.
Bye, everybody.